Limerick is sensational, beating Tipperary 323 to 217 at Park Queeve. The weather was absolutely horrendous, and their physicality and obviously their hurling level as well, and the way they used the ball just meant that Tipperary were always trying to swim upstream, and there was no doubt about who the better team is. And Limerick are back into a Munster final, looking heavy favourites to retain that after retaining the league title last week in their win over Clare, which obviously doubled up as the Munster quarter final. And Limerick just blew Tipperary away in the last 3 years when Tipperary have met Limerick in matches that have mattered, and I'm excluding the dead rubber clash in Munster round robin last year. Limerick have come out on top, and at the moment they've definitely got the Premier's number. And it is teams that have that physicality and athleticism throughout the pitch that upset Tipperary. There's no doubt about it, and it's going to be a long way back. And I think for Liam Sheedy, I think in some ways losing by 9 points and Seamus Flanagan mishitting that ball into the top corner at the end, he really can go to his team and sort of crack the whip and say, lads, this is unacceptable. Or it forces him to look at his team and think, right, did I make some poor decisions, selections? I think some of his players had tough days. Paddy Maher really struggled out there. We know that he was taken off. Sean O'Brien had a tough day at the office. Now, the pressure going into the backline was huge, but there was an awful lot of massive handling errors, and obviously that's going to happen on both sides with the weather, but certainly a couple of them in the Tipperary backline really did struggle. I think John Maher certainly had a baptism of fire coming on. He didn't have his greatest day ever. I think if Tipperary were trying to be generous to themselves, they'd say maybe Will O'Donoghue should have got a red card for his lash, which hit Noel McGrath in the head at the start of the second half. And to be honest, it probably was a red card, being honest, but because it's so wild. But there's no doubt that Limerick were the better team, and they possibly could have gone on to win the game anyway. They probably would have won the game anyway. I think it was like we all saw the Tipperary team when it came out the other night, and you were seeing younger players starting in the forward line against a really physical team in winter. You saw like Jason Ford obviously isn't a younger player, but he wouldn't be the most physical player in the world, and probably not the paciest either. He's a really good stickman. And then you had Jake Morris, who obviously scored that unbelievable goal, a brilliant team move from Tipperary. And then you had Mark Keogh as well, all of whom kind of struggle at different points in the game. And you're wondering why weren't more physical players started. Like Dan McCormick came in, and it was pretty evident almost immediately that he should have started the game. Maybe there was a fitness issue that he couldn't last the full game, but if he was fit to go, it would make sense that someone experienced who is always generally able to stand up against the other powerful teams. He came in and won frees and got on the ball. It's just especially in conditions like that, do you have players who can get the ball up first time? Because he can, and the amount of times that Tipperary players just spilled the ball, and obviously that pressure that Limerick put on you is always going to put you in bother. But Cian Lynch, him going centre forward, and because of that matchup that we obviously flagged early when we saw Alan Flynn named in the team, that he would go and man mark him. And Limerick, I presume they didn't know that was coming before Tipperary's team was released on Friday night. But as soon as they did, I would imagine it was at that stage they just said to Cian Lynch, "You know what, we're going to throw you in centre forward." Or maybe it was pre-designed before that. Either way, it was a masterstroke, because I don't think Tipperary necessarily would want to play with one of their smaller players as their centre back there. It's rare that kind of happens, and you saw the influence Declan Hannon had at the other end, especially in the first half. Diarmaid Burns was absolutely brilliant. He just seemed to be on the ball time after time. It could have been worse, but for a couple of Brian Hogan saves towards the end, and that's the worrying thing for Tipperary, that they come out of this game with Paddy Maher, the talisman for the last 10 or 12 years. He was taken off. Barry Heffernan came off with, was it a hamstring injury? It looked like he seemed to be holding that. And a lot of players in the Tipperary side that looked like they were off form. Bubbles came in, made no real impact of note. Even the goal that Tipperary got was a clear pickup from Noel McGrath and threw it to, hand passed it actually to his brother John, who finished it off nicely. Like Aaron Gallan was fairly tasty again. The way he pinched that goal or that ball off Ronan Maher for the goal was absolutely glorious. So for Tipperary, they could only create 26 chances over the course of the game. And ordinarily, when the weather is that bad, you think that's not too bad. But Limerick created 40. And the way they worked the ball around, the way they're so careful in possession in the sense of just hand passing it to each other, which is the lowest risk form of passing it in weather like that. And they just did it so good. Tipperary even got a few soft frees in the first half. But this is a Limerick team that, comparatively with Tipperary, they're able to burst out through tackles. They're physically bigger and stronger men, and they picked a bigger team than Tipperary picked, as in terms of what Tip had at their disposal. So it's no surprise that they're winning more of those sort of power plays, or contested balls, including the rucks. Grode Hegarty, good as ever, won that penalty. More mistakes at the back. I think that's something that Tipperary looked like. The weather's not going to get any better. Mightn't always be as bad as that, but like it's not going to get particularly better from here on out. And yeah, the Lynch, Darragh O'Donovan and Kyle Hayes switch, with Kyle Hayes going and wing back. Obviously, he's been a centre back underage. That all really worked really, really well. So for Tipperary, a sobering enough day at the office. Limerick look sensational, much like Galway looked last night. We could end up with a repeat of the 2018 final, All-Ireland final, if things keep going like this. But a huge amount of work for Tipperary to do. The one thing is, when you lose as comprehensively as this, it really does force you to analyse what way are we picking the team. Is this the best way we can line out? But at the same time, I'm not sure if just rejigging the pieces would be enough, because Limerick looked absolutely sensational.